Okay. It should be pretty good. I don't know for sure, but we're going to figure it out. Run the baseline setup and do the thing. So, the main thing I wanted to really discuss and just kind of get through really just relates to the, I'm going to turn off the fuel calculator. Don't really need it. Nor the radar, quite frankly. I just want the advanced panel. Okay, so the advanced panel is pretty much working the exact same as it did. It's just in certain cars you have slightly better functionality. Cool. So what I want to kind of discuss today is mainly as it relates to getting effective practice in, making the most of your time on the sim, because I know that lately I've been in a huge time crunch and I've been beguiled by the same issue. So I don't always have time to even get on, and even then, especially, still a struggle to do it right. Let me go ahead and turn down my volume really quick. There we go. That way it won't be too obtrusive. And I'll definitely still be over the car. Just wanted to make sure of that. Yeah, the main things I wanted to discuss relate to just how to really make the most of your practice time and how to really have fun in the sim. Obviously, if you're in this hobby and you are doing sim racing, you probably like it. So that much goes without saying. But really, like, sometimes it's like, okay, I only have X amount of time to really do what I want, so I want to maximize that. And that really depends on what you're looking for. There's a lot of different things. I'll try to keep this discussion as brief as possible, because I really only have an hour to do this myself. But, you know, are you trying to race for your own leisure? Are you trying to beat your friends? Are you trying to go into a ranked multiplayer? The first thing you want to do is determine what you're racing for, and make sure that you're also racing for you in that as well. That's a bit of a moot point. But determine what you're racing for. And hopefully not spinning at that. That's going to hurt the tires. So let me slow down a little bit, get them back up to temp, and we'll go ahead. You really want to determine to what end you're racing for and what you're looking for. You know, are you looking to enjoy the drive? Are you looking for some competitive edge? Are you doing it to learn or inform your driving in the real world? There's a lot of different options, and plenty more, excluding the ones I just said. But I think those are kind of the three broad topics that most people would fall under. And so in doing that, what you want to kind of say is, okay, I just want to enjoy myself and enjoy my time. Also, my Simsta thing, interesting. Yeah, I just want to enjoy my time and have fun with it. Okay. So then you need to figure out what kind of cars you want to drive. What excites you about driving and or driving fast. It doesn't always have to be driving fast, by the way. You can see taking a cruise, more or less like I am right now. There's no competitive bearing, there's no anything. It's just me and the track. While I'm not great, it is still very fun. And it's something that is giving me a lot of repose in a time when I feel like I am a little bit stressed. But if you just like pick up a car on a track and you're not sure, and you're especially just trying out for sim racing for the first time, or you're early in your journey, what I would say is going to be important is just focusing on one thing at a time. And I have a great instance of this because I literally jumped on to do the series, and I was like, okay, I'm going to try and do something new for this series and try and provide some visuals that, you know, my viewers haven't seen before. I was like, okay, let me boot up Race Room and do this and do that in this car I've not driven before. I've driven the track before, but I was having a lot of issues. Some of them seemed FFB related, but most of them just had to do with the fact that I had not driven that car and I did not know what to expect. And so I was trying to focus on talking and driving at the same time, which, by the way, harder than it looks. And I could not even keep the car under control at like a leisurely pace. And obviously I'm not driving very fast right now, but I'm in control of the car. I feel comfortable with it. And the reason being is because I know this car well already, because I'm taking baby steps. I've been driving this thing for about 8 to 10 weeks, pretty religiously. So I know what to expect, for the most part. And the other thing is, focus on tracks that you know, because when you start throwing tracks that you don't really know that well in front of yourself, it makes it harder, especially when you don't know where the turns are at and you're trying to learn it. For instance, I'm aware of Hungaroring, I know where everything goes. I'm not a huge fan of this track actually, but I know it well enough to at least, you know, kind of turn off my brain a little bit and follow the flow of the track. Now, as far as getting the best lines and best times around every corner, that's a bit of a different story. But for the purposes of this video, not going to be super important. But I'd say that, you know, putting yourself in a good comfort zone, stick to tracks that you know, stick to cars that you know, and change one variable at a time. I'm not saying to do the same thing forever. I'm saying that start small, change one variable at a time. So let's say I'm finished with this and I want to record the next video. I'm probably not going to switch off the Cadillac because this is a car that I know well, and it takes probably more time for me to learn a car than it does to learn a track. I'll probably go to a different track that I'm a little bit less familiar with, learn that, drive it, figure it out, and go from there. And maybe if I'm going to try a different car, then I'll stick to the same track. You know, if I want to try like the Radical SR10 or something like that, any other car really. You know, changing one variable at a time. And I'd also say to that same end, if you're going to be switching cars too, make sure that you don't go crazy. Like, there's certain cars that are going to have very similar characteristics, and there are certain cars that have very different characteristics. I touched a little bit on that in some of my previous videos, but not much. The point being that if I was to go from something like this to a like a Skip Barber, commonly known as a Skippies in iRacing, that's a low-power, open-wheel, single-seater formula car with very skinny tires, and is very much, in a lot of ways, a momentum car that you can't overdrive too much. Like, you can, like, there's a margin with that car, but you have to still be very careful with it. So, it requires a very different skill set to drive, and so, for me, that might not be as prudent of a decision. It might be better to switch to, like, a GT3 car, or a, or some other, you know, full-bodied vehicle that's reasonably comparable. Like, for instance, this has, I think, 460 horsepower, probably weighs about a little over 3,000 pounds, and it's got some basic driver assist, got traction control, ABS, a little bit of aero, not too much though. This is 2010's aero, comparably speaking, so not very sophisticated compared to some of the more recent stuff that's come out on the platform. Probably got all that. And you want to keep it relatively similar, just so that the learning process is easier, because I guarantee you the driving style will be more similar going from this to even like a 488 GT3 as opposed to going to like a like I said, a Skippy or a Legends car or a P2. It'll be slightly different, or it'll be a little bit more different, I mean. The other thing I want to stress in terms of really enjoying your practice time, especially if you're just driving for leisure, don't try to force yourself into a lot of new, and especially as that relates to finding the right sim for you, you know? Don't get so caught up in, oh, everyone thinks this is the best, everyone thinks that's the best. Do what works for you. For me, I thought for a while, like, oh yeah, or let me rephrase. For me, for a while, I really started getting into PC sim racing right around the time that Assetto Corsa Competizione was kind of on its way up, and it was becoming the shit. Like, I didn't have a PC until 2020, for the record. I think ACC came out in 2018. And that platform has grown quite a bit, and it's still really popular. But when I drove it, and to a certain extent when I still drive it, it's not quite the one for me. It's not my... I appreciate the spirit behind it. I love everything that Kunos is doing with it, but it doesn't feel right to drive in the same way that something like iRacing, Gran Turismo, or Race Room does. And so stick with what you like. Make the experience enjoyable for yourself. And as you get a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more experience, start to branch out to other things, you know. Don't limit yourself necessarily, but don't try and do everything at once. Okay then. And that really kind of covers a few of the bases as it relates to just enjoying the drive. But what say you want to get a little bit more competitive? Let's say you want to up the ante a little bit more. You want to beat some people. You want to beat some times. You want to beat some people. Then a lot of the same is going to follow. You really want to make sure you are changing as few variables as possible so that you have a bit more of an apples-to-apples comparison on everything, and it's easier to make improvements because less things are changing. For instance, case in point, my driving right now. Nothing's changing really. Same car, same track, same driver, and I'm just getting more time to acclimate to it, so I'm able to drive the car a little bit faster around the track. I don't really know what a competitive lap time is right now off the top of my head, but rest assured, I'm getting faster. And, what was I going to say? I'm sure I had the black box up. You guys aren't going to see that anyway. And yeah, just focus on really keeping everything tight, make sure your variables are good. But that even extends to little stuff like track temperature. Make sure your track temperature is similar, because in certain sims that's going to have a profound impact on the way the car drives and handles. When this track is about 30 degrees hotter, 30 degrees Fahrenheit that is, that will have a profound impact on how the grip is going to work around the track. And when the lighting conditions are different, like when, say, it's daytime or morning or night, it'll affect how you reference a lot of what's stuff on the track. So you want to keep things as similar as possible. And especially if you're talking about like competitive or ranked, keep your conditions as close as they will be to the actual competition. You can vary. Qualifying in the race will sometimes be in different conditions, or sometimes the conditions will evolve over time. So try to make yourself as familiar as you can with all the possibilities that you know for a fact you'll be facing. If I know the race is going to be in daytime, I'm not going to practice, or the race is only going to be in daytime, I'm not going to practice at night per se. And if I know the track temperature is usually going to be around 120 degrees, or it's going to be at this particular date with these particular weather conditions, I'm probably going to try and mimic them as opposed to just ignoring that. You know, keeping as many of the variables tight as you can. And further, what you want to do is find a good way to really start improving if you're talking about on the competitive side. And a good way to do that is referencing other people and referencing other data. Right now you can see I'm just driving against my own Ghost, and that is giving me a good point of comparison to work against, to say, okay, I'm slower here, I'm faster here, I'm doing this here, I'm losing time here, etc. Also, lap time delta is super helpful for that reason as well. But don't limit yourself just to yourself. There's a big, wide world of sim racing out there. So you can download laps a lot of the time. You can download replays. You can look at what other people are doing. You can watch videos on YouTube, like you're watching this one, hopefully. Oh yeah, by the way, don't forget to like and subscribe and all that nice stuff. And yeah, it's really not a... No, and that's the funny thing. It's not a magic or complicated process. It's not some hidden secret. It really does boil down to putting in the time, putting in the hours to get the results. And in order to do that, you've got to look, you've got to use not only your driving senses, but also your analytical abilities to get the most. And this goes to all forms of competition, all forms of sport, all forms of racing. You know, the people who are taking in the most and are really putting in the work, they're going to reap the benefit a lot of the time. All right, I'm starting to get a little bit more heavy-handed with the car, but I like that. And what you want to try and accomplish is to push a little bit further past your own limits. And I'll try and demonstrate a little bit now, but you might hear me get silent. Because you want to push your braking points out a little further. You want to, or let me back up. You want to make sure your exit speeds from corners are a little bit better. You want to make sure you're taking the best line to allow for that. You want to make sure you know what's coming up after each corner. And to do that, you have to put in the time. I did not know the Nürburgring course very well until, guess what happened one day? I did the 24 Hours of Nürburgring on Gran Turismo, and I was forced to learn that thing. And I made a lot of mistakes, I had a lot of offs, but by the time I was done with that, I knew that course like the back of my hand. I knew where every corner was. I knew where everything was coming up at a moment. And it forced me to learn by way of time. But something else I could have done to also be a little more helpful than just, putting in a literal, literally 24 hours of driving is to just, as opposed to that, watch, see what people are doing, take in the data, watch your replays, check for braking points. For instance, where am I going to brake here? Not the 100. I'm going to brake before then because 100's a little too late. But you don't know that until you start watching other people do it. And I don't know if I could be braking later there until I see what other people are doing. And there's also a lot of other minute factors to work with. But you really have to find the ones. You have to try and find as much data as you can and try and replicate what you're seeing in a lot of ways from faster people. And that doesn't mean don't be creative. Drive your own way. Everyone has their own style and do what you need to do. But understand that a lot of times if someone's faster than you, it means that their style is a little bit better suited to the application. Or they're making less mistakes. And you can always learn from that. And then when you really, really, really feel like you're locked into a rhythm, that's when you can start to push. But let me back up, because I actually have screwed up a little bit. I haven't done this perfectly, and we'll see if this comes out all right in the edit. But the first thing you want to do, really, when you're focusing on getting your bearings for a race or for a competition, for anything, is start slow. You do not want to, try and go all out immediately. You don't want to try and do all of that, because you're going to ultimately waste your time. If you're practicing for a race, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you're crashing all the time. It only makes sense if you're crashing once you already know where your general abilities are at, what the car wants to do, and where the limit is. You saw I had a moment earlier, or I'll show it, I guess, if it's not seen. I had a moment earlier where I very nearly lost control of the car, but I was able to keep it gathered for two reasons. The first is that I had a pretty good idea that I was about to go over the limit before it happened. And did I do enough to prevent it? No, I didn't. So that's why the car started to get away from me. But what did I do after that? I knew what was going to happen once it got past the limit, and so I responded appropriately, and the car eventually came back to me. Not all cars are going to be that easy to save, and not all of them can be saved at all, but you have to try to work your way up to the limit rather than pushing right against it immediately. Because if you do that, you're just going to find yourself more frustrated than as opposed to helping yourself. And what you want to do as well is, as you get more comfortable, as you slowly start to get your feet under you, you get your consistency with the car, you're putting in lap times where you're within about a half a second each lap. That's when you want to start trying to push out your markers a little bit. And notice that I'm about 9 laps deep, and I'm just now starting to get more comfortable with the car. I'm just now starting to push a little bit harder, because it took me that long to really understand, okay, this is where I can, and this is where I can't. This is what I can, this is what I can't. You know, brake earlier here, brake later here. Make sure your steering application is a little bit more gentle in this area. Don't get overzealous with the power. And yeah, and another thing is that if you have trouble, or if you're struggling a lot with the car, even in spite of trying to take it slow at first, don't be afraid to put on some assist. Don't be afraid to work with what you've got and try and get it a little bit better. A lot of people don't advocate for assists, and I'm not necessarily one to, loudly say that you should, but I do have a whole series of videos about the assists, called the Assist Guide, and I do think they're useful when they're useful. And so I think there's something to be said for at least trying them and seeing if they help quite a bit. But I don't think you should ever become reliant on them. The first step before you turn assist on, I think honestly, is always going to be take it slow, be very deliberate with your inputs, and then work your way up from there. That's an off track. Because that's going to be the most important thing. Okay, so let's say that you've gotten to the point where you are much better, you're consistent, you're calm, you're cool, you know what you're doing, you're not changing your variables, and you're getting ready for your race, and you feel like you've got a damn good thing going, but your pace isn't there. That's when it's time to start really looking at what's important. From a competitive standpoint, most of the time you're going to spend in a sim racing, or in a sim, is going to be on power. So you want to make sure that all the time you spend on power is well optimized. And a good instance was just that last turn. If you're looking at the Ghost relative to my driving, I was able to get on the power earlier, getting onto that straight, which is one of the longer ones on this track. Not a super long one, but one of the longer ones. And because of that, I was able to eke out a few hundredths of advantage, despite being the same car, same power, same everything. And all of that is super important, especially when it comes to qualifying. But as it relates to the race, the first thing you want to focus on is your consistency, and then suit your pace to match, because it's a lot easier to work from a solid baseline and build than it is to try and build it's a lot easier to work from a baseline that's slow and build pace into it than it is to try and make a fast baseline from nothing. Trust me. And just a quick recap of everything. What you want to do, in any case, you want to enjoy your time in the sim, start slow. Don't rush it. Don't try and go fast immediately. Don't go crazy. Start off slow, get your feet under you, get consistent with the car, and make sure you know what it's going to do in most normal situations. As that happens, that's when you want to start to build on that. So when you start to add pace, it's when you start to play around with your braking points, your acceleration points, how you use your control inputs to affect the car in a way that's going to be more conducive. And then from there, and only once you're really comfortable, start changing small variables at a time. And I was saying that as it relates to the car and track combo earlier with casual driving, but even here, you can go more minute with that in a competitive sense, because in a lot of times if you're running a competitive series, you're going to be, sticking with one car over a series of tracks or something like that. And what you can do to start messing with small things is go to your setup screen, start messing around with what's there, if it's not a fixed setup series, that is, and start playing around with the controls to see what suits better. If you want more traction control, if you want more ABS, or brake bias in particular, that's a huge one. But don't play around with too many variables at once. Try to change as little as possible so you have a good idea of what you're affecting and how you're affecting it. Start small with your variables. And again, recap on everything if I need to give the quick and dirty. Start slow. Build it up. And then start making changes. You don't want to rush that, because if you do, that's just going to make the process a lot more contrived. And I get it. There's always this lingering feeling of, wow, I can't win a race, or wow, I can't do X or Y or Z, better. And I just want to get in and be able to prove something. I know it. But before you know it, you have to show it. And the only way you can show it is if you build it. And the only way you can build it is if you take the time. Sure, I can get better at driving a car in the midst of a race, but it's going to be a much more conducive environment to do it when I'm practicing, because it allows me to focus on much more minute details. It allows me to not get as distracted by certain things and just really have fun with it. And I'm also not saying you have to practice for every race. I'm not saying you have to be ready to go before everything, to the nth degree. I'm just saying that it's a lot more helpful when you do, and B, that it allows you a sense of agency that you might not it's a lot more helpful when you do it. It gives you agency that you might not otherwise have, to really relax and drive with your brain off a little bit in a manner similar to what I'm doing. I'm honestly not being super fast, but I'm at least pretty relaxed while I'm doing this. I feel like I'm at least still at a good pace. And that's really going to be the key to enjoying your time in the sim, or making the most of your time in the sim in terms of preparation, is taking it slow, removing the variables, removing the AI cars especially. You'll notice I'm in a test session right now, and that's for a reason. You don't want to have a bunch of other AI cars getting in the way of your flow, because I know a lot of these sims have interesting AI. I'm looking at you, Project Cars, too. That can and will get in your way, and sometimes it's better to just focus on what you need to do before you start adding other unknown variables into the mix. And other people or other AI drivers are the greatest variable. Start slow, build your pace up from the foundation that you start with. Start changing variables, and then and only then is it going to be more easy to work around the other variables that are other drivers. And that's going to be about everything. I'm going to go ahead and continue the session because I'm having a little too much fun, quite frankly. But thank you guys for tuning in. It's been my absolute pleasure. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave it a like. If you like everything that's going on with the channel, make sure you stay subscribed to get further updates. And hit that bell icon to continue to be notified of any and all future videos, because that's how the algorithm be working. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, I'd love to see you down in the comment section. I try to make sure I'm responsive to a lot of stuff. And if you want to see the continuation of the series, I got plenty more to talk about. So yeah, until next time, you guys take care, race fair, and I'll see you around. Oh, and in case it comes up to anyone, no, I'm not going to do a lap guide for this car and track combo because A, I'm not really particularly good at iRacing. I'm decent, but I'm not like someone you should necessarily be taking tips from. And B, I've not scienced out where, most of the fast guys are going to be at on this combo, so I don't know what I have or what I'm missing. I really just did this for the funsies. If I end up working with a combo I'm a bit more familiar with, I might do that in the future, but we'll see.